with Bio1. And this morning we're talking about what happens when journals change platforms. And I'm joined by several colleagues who've also been through this fantastic experience. Bring with me Kelly Andrus of Duke University Press and Project Euclid, Dina Hopner from the University of Central Pennsylvania. Central Pennsylvania? Oh my, many states away. Central Florida, sorry about that. Just checking to see if everybody's awake. And also coming to us live from the Zoom room is Liz Brown from Project Muse.
Recording in progress.
And I want to start off by, we look like three aggregators and a librarian, three nonprofit aggregators and a librarian, but actually our migrations were very, very different in style and substance. And so I want to go around the table and have everyone do a brief introduction, what their migration was like, what their experience was, and then we're going to throw to our colleague Liz, who's in the Zoom room, who has a presentation ready to talk about hers as well. So why don't we start with you, Kelly? No, let's sit. I'm going to depart from the program now.
Hi, I'm Kelly Andrus. I am the Publishing Technology Manager at Duke University Press, serving Project Euclid, which is a mathematics content hosting platform. I worked on a platform migration that launched in February 2021. I worked closely with my colleague Leslie Eager at Duke University Press and David Ruddy at Cornell University Library. Together, we researched and learned a lot about our options, searching for a vendor. We read and interviewed, and we landed with SPIE as our content host. And we're very fortunate to have such a collaborative working relationship with folks there.
Hi, my name is Christine Orr, and I'm the Sales and Marketing Director at Bio1. And back in 2019, we migrated our content off of a commercial platform also to SPIE, and we were their first client. And what was notable about our migration was not just that we migrated our entire corpus, front file and back file of 200 plus journals, but we also, as a second phase of this, migrated our entire sales operations system. So we were migrating not only publications content, publications metadata, but also all of the sales support, financials, and entitlements data. So it was a bunch more, it was kind of a big two-part migration. And one of the things that was notable was that we were very, it was very important for us to do something mission aligned. We really thrive on nonprofit collaboration. And so this was a bit of an experimental partnership. SPIE had fairly recently built their own platform, was hosting their own, they were self-hosted, and through some collaboration with staff across both organizations decided that this might be a really innovative kind of nonprofit partnership. So that was the genesis of what we did. So, and let me give it to Dana.
Well, I am not a publisher. I'm a librarian at the University of Central Florida in Pennsylvania, and so, but I am on the NISO IPA, that's the Internet Information Policy and Analysis Topic Committee, and we were the group or the topic committee that sponsored the Content Platform Migration Working Group, which I co-chaired with Kim Steigley, who was at Duke University Press at the time. So my experience with content platform migrations is from the receiving end, where we're being told that content A is going to now be over here, whether it's owned by a different publisher or whether it's just trying to move to a platform that makes more sense or is more updated, has more features. And we get a lot of these in libraries, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but I was sort of the customer, the final end customer for these, if we don't count library users, they don't really matter. So I'll be talking about that perspective.
And we're really excited to have Athena here. And as we were going through the planning for this session, we realized that, so from a publishing perspective, as a publisher, you only do this, mercifully, once every 5-10 years or so. But Athena noticed, she goes, oh, I go through about 3 to 6 or 10 of these a year. She said, oh, she's got the most track record here. So we're really, really gratified to have her talking today. And with that, we're going to throw to a presentation from our colleague Liz Brown, who's going to address the points that you see up here. We're going to be talking a little more in depth about the all the fun, the peculiarities that happen when you migrate content, all of the content metadata. We're going to go through talking about communications with different stakeholders and different stakeholder groups, because that's something we often think so much about the technical side of things, but really letting people know what needs to happen, what will be happening is so critical. We'll talk about the stakeholder groups. And then we're going to talk about something that was not available at the time that any of us went through this migration, and that was the NISO recommended practice for content migration and what it covers. I think we'll speak a bit more about that and things we wish we could have learned at the time had the standard been available when we went through our respective migrations. And then we're going to have some time at the end for questions and answers. And so with that, I'm going to throw it to the tech table, and we'll hear from Liz about the Project News experience.
Hi, I am Elizabeth Brown, also known as Liz, and I am Publisher Relations Manager at Project Muse, where I focus mainly on journals. I'm sorry not to be there in Charleston with everyone, but I'm delighted to join the panel remotely. Project Muse is a digital platform with books and journals focusing mainly on arts, humanities, and social sciences, and they're all from not-for-profit publishers. We sell collections of journals and books, but also have journals and books available on their own outside of collections. Since we develop and maintain our own platform, I'm not talking today about migrating Project Muse to another platform. We have journals migrate to Muse from other platforms all the time, but today I want to set the stage for this panel discussion by focusing on an initiative from earlier this year when we had, I guess, what you could call a mass migration of journals upon the closing of JSTOR's hosting program, and by also answering the basic question of what were some of the challenges we faced. When JSTOR decided to sunset their journal hosting program, the publishers using that platform for their current content were faced with finding new homes for their journals. Ultimately, 90 of these journals migrated to the Project Muse platform. 41 of these journals were actually already publishing on Muse in our collections program, but their single title institutional and individual subscriptions, plus their society member access, were migrating. 49 journals actually migrated with their content into Project Muse's hosted journals program, with the exception of the journal Classical Journal, which joined the collections. I got the sense when working on this initiative that JSTOR was aware of and concerned that this program closing was going to create upheaval for both their clients and the institutional subscribers. Project Muse worked very closely with JSTOR throughout the whole process, from publishers selecting their new platform to the planning and implementation of the whole migration. This initiative featured some challenges, some of which were unique. First, while there were 3 university presses and some larger societies with multiple journals included in the list of publishers, we also had quite a few of what I call independent journals, which publish their journals on their own. So that meant a larger number of contacts to work with than if all 90 journals were from, say, 4 university presses and or 2 societies or something like that. Also, these independent journals can sometimes require a more hands-on approach, since we're working with editors or society officers or executive directors that have other things on their plate in addition to migrating their journals to new platforms, especially if they're full-time faculty. Another thing to contend with and make sure the publishers all understood was the concept of JSTOR's digital availability date, which is basically the volume that the current subscription started with on JSTOR. I think because a lot of these journals were in the JSTOR archive, they were able to go pretty far back without the expense of mounting the content anew. So we had journals that included 10 or even 15 years of content in the current subscription. For the journals already on Muse, this wasn't so bad since the coverage was often more or less the same. We recommended to the publishers migrating content to Muse that they make the same content available on Muse as had been on JSTOR. So most publishers did that, but publishers did have to pay fees to mount all that content since it had never been on Muse before. Fortunately, we were able to ingest XML metadata from JSTOR to produce the content more inexpensively. We also faced an additional challenge that I hadn't really anticipated when many of our new publishers opted to fulfill subscriptions on their end and have us provide access. And we've always offered that option, but we've not had that many self-fulfilling publishers. So one big wrinkle in the workflow occurred when some of them kind of delayed in sending the list of subscribers to set up, which kind of bogged things down at the very busiest moment in the migration. Then we also, as the platform, are responsible for providing post-cancellation access that JSTOR had formerly provided on behalf of our migrating publishers. We don't actually provide PCA for single title subscriptions on the Muse platform. So we've been working on providing access for these particular migrating entitlements, which should be implemented this fall. Fortunately, there were not a huge number of claims, and also at least a third of the claims are covered by the library's Muse collection subscription. So they've had access to many of the journals all along. But it's been an interesting project. We weren't able to get contact information for the libraries, and we've had to think through the implications of giving access to institutions that are not active customers in our fulfillment system. And of course, we're not receiving any compensation for the work that this entails. And it's not not a small amount of work. So that's been a challenge. Communication during a major migration is key. And I have a feeling there'll be at least one, if not all of the other panelists talking about this. JSTOR only had a 2-month grace period in 2022 for continuing to make content available to 2021 subscribers. So that put a lot of pressure on us to have access set up for all customers by the end of February. And I had this fear that in April or so, we would have libraries just then realizing these journals had changed platforms. So I do think we succeeded in getting the word out to libraries and agents. And we were definitely bombarded with inquiries from institutions wanting to make sure their access was in place, pretty much right when our fulfillment team was already working hard to complete everything by the end of February. And of course, that was in addition to this bottleneck from the access-only subscriptions that we had to deal with. So I believe JSTOR, and I'm pleased that we did get everything done by the end of February. I believe JSTOR did an excellent job of organizing and communicating with both publishers and institutions during the sunsetting of their hosting program. Since they're not here to talk on their own behalf, they produced a very helpful spreadsheet of all the journals with details on the new platform. At the very beginning, JSTOR and Muse collaborated to create a checklist to help guide the planning and migration. The checklist was based on project transfer or the transfer protocol or guidelines, which of course is for journals changing publishers, not platforms. At that time, we did not have a platform migration checklist available to us that we could riff on. But over 2 years later, right when we were about to do the actual launch on Muse, a draft migration checklist was indeed made available from NISO. I remember reading through it and thinking how long it was, but obviously it could be tailored to the specific needs of a specific migration. It's too bad we didn't have that to begin with. But I am so grateful for the work of that NISO committee that created it. And I'm sure that I and my Muse colleagues will make good use of this checklist in the future. So now back to my fellow panelists. Thank you.
And yeah, one of the interesting things from Liz's presentation was the society access and how, how they, I think one of the most critical things when you're migrating your content and your metadata is that everyone's business rules are going to be very different. And so migrating whatever you need to be able to support that. I'll say one thing from Bio1's perspective, we did indeed also supply post-cancellation access for many years of content to many customers, and so that was something else that was critical. One of the things that we did was also use it as an opportunity to clean up a lot of our customer data, because this is something I'll throw to Kelly about as well. When you're doing a migration like this, it reveals all of the quirks and all of the workarounds and every little bit of dirty data that you've embedded just to kind of like get over the hump with something as you're trying to, serve a customer or support a business rule. So we actually had worked to clean up an enormous amount of our customer data and standardize, get rid of any duplicates, standardize names, and apply some unique standard identifiers at the time, which made part of our migration a lot smoother. So Kelly, can you also speak about that? You had noted that there was a lot of, your migration also revealed some quirks and irregularities in data. And can you talk about that in your data management?
Sure. In addition to sort of the back-end customer based data, we also had content data that over the years, a lot of our content started in the days of print, and we didn't think about having to present content in the digital world. So we had to cross hurdles like what to do with an issue 2A and 2B when the digital world was expecting numeric data. So across gathering and analyzing all of our content, we really had to sit down and sort of create some permanent workarounds and how to handle this data. For instance, spring 2019 publication date may not be sufficient enough. You need to really add the year behind that date in order for sequencing on the digital display work and in order for our moving wall open access to work. We wanted everything to be seamless, so we really had to go behind the scenes and dig into all the technical data, even if it isn't presented online. Some other data hurdles that we had to cross were IP addresses and IP address overlaps. That's something that our old platform allowed and our new platform did not. So there was a good deal of untangling and trying to resolve some of those conflicts. I recommend using any resources you might have available. For instance, our French institutions really had a lot of overlap. So we were fortunate enough to lean on our data from Duke University Press and their ISTech data to sort of reference what IP address goes where. So that was another big data hurdle to uncover. And again, Christine, like you said, nailing down the business logic behind everyone's data and sort of coming to the common ground.
Right.
That's very important.
And Athena, can you talk about some of the content migration issues that you've had? Anything kind of notable or any particular stories that you'd care to share? Any examples of ones that went really well or ones where we certainly learned a lot since you're going through so many of these?
Sure. I have gone through a lot of these because, as you said before, the libraries see all of the platform migrations instead of a vendor who sees maybe one every 5 years. We're seeing we have 500 contracts or relationships with various vendors, and they're changing their platforms in some way all the time. So we get a lot of communications about these, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I don't want to jump ahead of our agenda, but some of the things that come to mind, and some good ones were where they were really proactive, reaching out and letting us know and involving us in conversations and checking early on. And some of the funnier things that had happened before the recommended practice existed. There was one instance where the content had been migrated, but it was dual hosting. So the old content was on the old platform. The content was already on the new platform as well, but not yet all of it and not quite released. So we were getting problem reports about a particular book, and we would go and look, and it would be like the list page, the math formulas didn't, either they're not scanned right, it didn't work. And the vendor would look at their version and say, no, it looks perfect. We don't see any problem. It took us a good month to figure out that we were looking at the different platforms, that our links from our catalog had not yet been updated to point to the new platform. So you can run into weird situations like that. And you mentioned quirks. I think that there's so many layers and wrinkles to all of the content and the systems that you're going to run into them all the time. One more quirk that I'll mention that we ran into is on the library side, we have to do work with content platform migrations too. It's not like, oh, well, you guys have to do all the work and we just get to sit back and wait for the good results. Because we have all these links in our catalog, like I mentioned, and our other sources, and the way we represent the content is distributed across our libguides, catalogs, and course pages, and those links get stale. And the vendors very nicely do things like have redirectors. So we found when we were facing a Springer migration that we had links from our catalog to a platform they hadn't had in existence for like 10 years. And they had a redirector and it worked, so those links worked. But with the new platform migration, they weren't even aware of that old linking style, even though they've been handling it. The migration hadn't tracked it. So we run into our own faults where we didn't do the appropriate updating and have to clean up our own links in order to work with the new platform. So I won't keep going on, but yeah.
Oh, no, you could. These are all really useful lessons, thinking about the Bio 1 migration. I mentioned that we actually had ours was a they all are, they're all very extensive roadmaps. And so we had started in, 2017 and made this decision. The content went live in January of 2018, and then our 2019 for the content, and then 2020 with our sales operation being able to invoice and actually do our own tie and invoice to the authentication and turn on access for clients. But back in 2017, we actually had done something that Kelly mentioned with all of the the quirks in the institutional data. We're trying to make sure, obviously, that all of our institutional clients are still supported and still getting the access to the content that they paid for. We actually had worked with a vendor called Ringgold to help us normalize all of that subscriber and all of that institutional subscription data, so we could be sure to dedupe and just do that kind of cleanup and normalize any organization names and make sure we were truly supporting the institutions we're supposed to be supporting. But that was in 2017. As you can see, we didn't even go live for another 2 years after that. So it's really quite an extensive roadmap. And that was something else in our migration to SPIE. We got a wonderful partner vendor with them, and we were able to do not only the the content and the metadata, but also the sales. But we did make the decision to stagger that migration and not try to do everything all at once. It honestly just would have been too much. So that was something really important as well. Let's see. And yes, we all talked about the migration of legacy data and things like that. So thinking a little bit about the communications component of it. Besides subscribing libraries, I was looking at the NISO standard and really talk about all of the constituencies here: the publisher, the content platform vendor, libraries and consortia, library solutions providers. Can you talk a little bit, Kelly, about some of your communications strategy at all to those constituencies? Are there other constituencies too that you?
We did have a range of folks to speak out to. We created a lot of technical documentation for our publishers, many of which were new to the XML language of JATs and bits. And so we really reached out pretty much one-on-one to provide templates and examples, and really did a lot of hand-holding to get their content up and in addition to get them to be independent and create their own XML moving forward. So some are taking a little longer than others, but we are still moving along on that regard. And, you know, really providing thorough documentation, screenshots, really one-on-one guidance on specific content hurdles. That's been really important. In addition, we needed to reach out to our librarians and our customers. So we hosted a platform migration website in which we had FAQs, sort of known problems that we were experiencing, just one place where they could have a resource to follow up and check in, reach out to us if they had any specific questions. So to serve both the publishers and the librarians, we hosted a beta site prior to launch. And this allowed our publishers to review their content, it allowed librarians to test access, and again, it uncovered some more tasks behind the scenes hurdles to tackle before our launch day. So there was really a wide range of folks to consider and reach out to.
Yeah, we also did a lot of that kind of operational communications to our library, and we have a very extensive network of consortia that we work with and partner with. So we included them, of course, in all of our communications and all kind of the nuts and bolts, the things that you need to know. When are the sunset dates? What are the overlap dates? The beta site. We went out and worked with key constituents or key libraries to do some testing of the site. Are you still getting what you should have access to and all of that? But one piece that was different for us, and it's not mentioned in the NISO standard, was we actually did an awful lot of communication to our board and our publishers, because it was a huge investment of time and resources. And so we wanted to make sure that they were on board with this. We needed their okay to do it. And we wanted to talk about, how this was part of, honestly, like our Bio One story. We really love to be a nonprofit collaborator. So, moving from a commercial publisher to a nonprofit partner in SPIE, we wanted to be able to ensure that we had solid board buy-in for why we were doing what we're doing, and they understood that this was going to take staff time and resources over the coming couple of years. And then that was also part of what we communicated to our libraries, in addition to all of the really important how-to punch list things. We wanted to make sure that we really consider our librarians our partners, and we wanted to make sure that they understood what we'd be going through. And it also, frankly, gave us, kept us in everybody's good graces, which was really important, because there will be problems, there will be hiccups, there will be delays. And so making sure that your customers understand why you're doing what you're doing and not just what you're doing was, for us, a really important piece of the mix. So Athena, would you like to talk a little bit about communications and what you love, what you don't love, what we could all do better?
Okay, yeah, so most vendors now will spin up a website, which is great, because frankly, the timing of your communications, it can be out of sync with when the librarians can act on something. So we do communicate early, but not too often, because I don't want my mailbox flooded. But spin up a page where I can go and check the details when I need them. But my biggest complaint and request is that you separate your marketing from your technical communications. Because if I'm receiving emails regularly about the newsletter that has information about a new article is published and new subject collections that might be coming up, that's great for my subject librarians. And as an electronic resources librarian, not at all useful for what I do daily, unless I'm in a small library and do everything. Really, it's ideal to have them clearly distinguishable in my mailbox, and maybe come from the customer service record that I already am working with, someone who knows the library and can send it out, and then maybe have follow-up questions and dialogue if need be. So that would be ideal. And I urge you also to communicate. You mentioned communicating with your board, which is great, but also communicate to the other service partners, communicate to the knowledge-based vendors, to the statistics providers, to everyone who may be affected by the fact that you're migrating. Because if a librarian is looking at your email and saying, well, has Open Athens been told about this? Do I need to reach out to Open Athens to make sure our access will be continue to work. That's really inefficient. Much better and more effective if the platform or the publisher or whoever default contacts them and tells Open Athens, and they can work out how that new authentication process will work. So those are my biggest requests regarding authentication.
Oh, great. We, as you can see, we're just scratching the surface. This is an incredibly deep topic, an incredibly technical topic. So I do want to take a few moments to talk about the NISO standard practice or the recommended practice, and then have a few minutes for Q&A and bring Liz back in. Athena, can you talk just very briefly about this? And I will say, when I was surfing around the NISO website, I found a 2012 presentation from Todd talking about this. So clear, and the practice was released, what, last year? November 2021. So clearly we've all been, you know, trying to get our hands around this issue and bring some standards to it for a long time.
Okay, well, as I mentioned, I was on the content platform migration working group, and I was not alone. We had a group that represented a lot of stakeholders. I recommend you just go to the website and look at them. I'm not going to read them all, but there was Wiley and other universities and Ithaca for JSTOR, ProQuest and Yale University, KnowledgeWorks Global, Silverchair. So we had representation from a lot of different stakeholders, but certainly not all of the stakeholders involved. And it was started because librarians were going through, say, we had an informal survey, and librarians reported seeing between, I think, 6 and 10 per year, like 30 from 2019 until 30 migrations were reported over the period of, I think, 2 years. I would have to go back to make sure I have those details right. But so we started talking about the need to make this easier for all stakeholders and to outline what sort of communications might help, what we need to think about and give advice to the platform vendors, to the content vendors, and all of them. So we created a working group, we looked at the existing standards to get some ideas for not only how to present this, but what standards relate and need to be mentioned in the recommended practice. And then wrote different segments that it's basically a topic area and then a little summary and then a list of recommendations for each stakeholder. Then we took those recommendations and we sort of divvied them up. We created a spreadsheet with an indication of which time in the migration you might want to be thinking about this. So there's a working spreadsheet that you can download and use however you like, that you can filter by the stakeholder group, the time in the migration, and I think
Like responsibilities, like who's supposed to do
Right.
what
the general
at each, yeah,
words,
it's
like
great.
whether it's communication or whether it's metadata related, things like that. So it's pretty easy to find this online. You Google NISO content platform migration, but it is recommended practice 38-2021. So you can find it that way too.
Yeah. And with that, I'd love to, just because we're a little bit short, love to open it up to questions from anyone. If anyone has questions, please use the microphone so that we can record your comments and questions. Just head on over to the mic.
Hi, thank you very much. Allison Beelan at Duke University Press, and have lived through several migrations and watched Kelly manage the Project Euclid. And so I would be really curious to hear what each of you think about the pros and cons of there being a period of dual hosting and overlap versus the pros and cons of a hard switchover.
I'm not the technical gal, so I'm going to defer this to Kelly.
Well, I only experienced a hard switchover, and I do think that was the best approach, just based on everything else we had to manage. I think building all of our tasks and documentation to one point in time and just make the cut was really the best approach for our small team. We really had to wear a lot of hats. And I don't think I could imagine what it would have looked like to try to balance two platforms.
Athena, are there any pros and cons from the librarian perspective of having dual hosting for a while, or?
Absolutely. If in a perfect world, I prefer dual hosting because, well, I guess if things are perfect, then we've done all of our work in advance and stuff. But if I have links out there that are pointing to the old platform, and I'm sure that I do, then having the dual hosting gives us time to find those and resolve them. Plus, there's often things that the programmers get overzealous often and will put JavaScript and things in your page that will break with the authentication system or something like that. And it happens less often now, but it used to be very normal where we would find, oh, the platform works except for this feature. The platform works except for that feature. So dual hosting lets us have a backup way of getting to the content, which is really what we care about, what our users care about. But I understand it is a lot of work. And if you had to choose between putting the effort into getting all those things resolved in advance of the switchover or having a dual hosting, I understand. I prefer that you put your man hours where they need to be. But I do see the advantages of dual hosting.
Sure. And Liz, I think, had a comment on that as well. Liz Brown.
Yeah, if y'all can hear me, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, we did have a 2 month, grace period where the JSTOR platform kept the 2021 subscribers, so that was great. But obviously there were new subscribers coming in for 2022 and so forth, and they wouldn't have been able to take advantage of it. I would have loved to have had a more robust grace period or dual hosting. I guess ultimately it's up to the publisher to figure out what they could best do. But yeah, we sort of had at least one version of that. So that worked very well for us.
Great. I think we had one more question.
Yeah, hi. Kia ora, Adam from Coco. Thanks for this very interesting panel. It's just a very narrow question. You touched briefly on having to help people to produce JATs and bits. And I'm just wondering how you go about that and if you can see anything, any ways that could be made easier.
That's a good question. From our perspective, we transformed all of our content on the back end. And David Roddy at Cornell University Library was in charge of that piece. We took everything from the Project Euclid platform that was hosted in a Perl script established 20 years ago. And so the programmers at Cornell really worked hard to sort of help transform and write scripts to get all of our back content up and running. So at that point, we had good templates and examples of all of the 20 years worth of content to pass over to our publishers. Really, it was sort of working from recent templates that we had transformed and providing them with that, give them an example of what's expected. We also have JAX specs and documentation available for reference. And then, as you get really into the nitty gritty, call us up, send us an email. We really worked one-on-one with each publisher to cover all the various types of questions and content out there. Does that help?
Great. And I'll just take one moment if everyone has kind of a 1 or 2 line big lesson learned that they'd like to share with the room. Liz, I'll go to you first if you had one quick lesson for everyone.
Oh, a quick lesson for everyone. Yeah, I guess the quick lesson is there's no one quick lesson. There's so many factors that go into this. But I would just welcome the new NISO checklist, and communication is key. So that's what I'll contribute.
Great. Athena?
My big lesson is that we didn't think of everything, and this recommended practice needs to grow and be refined. And fortunately, there will be a group, there's a group being formed to maintain and advance this. So if you're interested, find Nettie. She's around here somewhere.
Nettie, raise a hand if Nettie's here. Great. And Kelly?
I would say really having your strong team ready to jump on everything. You need a variety of skill sets. You need problem solvers. You need big picture communicators. So really, you can focus on everyone's individual talents and collaborate and bring it all together.
That's the best case scenario.
Yep. And I will say, we actually had made the investment and hired someone a new staffer to help manage this migration. One thing the immediate thing you'll notice about this recommended practice and about many of them is how long it is, how much there is to be accomplished. And so if you can make the investment in having a dedicated either consultant or staffer to project manage the whole thing, that will help you continue flying the plane while you're building the new plane. So that was really a key piece of success for Bio1's migration. And with that, I just want to thank everybody. Thank you to Liz coming in remotely, Athena and Kelly. And I'll throw up all of our contact details there if anyone else would like to reach out and further questions. I know this was quite a brief session and there's so much more to talk about, but we love to talk migration, so we would love to hear from you all. And thank you so much. Thank you.